Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Really excited to be talking to you about this topic. It's such an important one as it pertains to retail. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Menaka Gopinath. I lead our online communities practice as well as our social intelligence analytics work in the US. Our work really focuses on giving a voice to people and making sure that we're providing human-centered insights to help brands make better decisions and ultimately be better brands. So for the next half hour or so, we're going to talk about what it means to prioritize a more inclusive retail industry. There's no question that greater diversity and inclusion is good for business. There are countless data points to reiterate the value with the events of the past year, putting even more urgency on the importance of diversity and inclusion. We've definitely seen a lot of brands coming out with messaging and their commitment to D&I. But despite a lot of these messages, there's still a lot of work to do. And we're seeing that there is a lack of women and people of color at the leadership level. Retail's really no exception to this as well. There's been a long-standing need for more equitable and diverse actions that consider both the shoppers and the employees. So today we're going to discuss that in more detail. Before we do that, I did want to introduce the two women who I have joining me today. So Adriana, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Menaka. My name is Adriana Mora. I work in the community team. I'm a director. I've been with Ipsos for quite a while now, over 10 years, working in several markets. I worked in Brazil. I worked in many Latin American countries. So I do have a very good experience with Hispanic and Latin American consumers cross-culturally.
Thanks, Adriana. And Pamela.
Thanks, Menaka. Thanks for having me. I would introduce myself by saying that my last corporate job, I was the vice president of retail brand for Nike for North America, but also spent some time working for Nike in Western Europe and retail as well. I escaped corporate America about 3 years ago and now have my own boutique consulting firm where I serve on the board of directors of two privately held retail-focused companies, CoverFX and Hannah Anderson, and also am an investor and advisor to several small businesses here in Portland, Oregon, where I live.
Great. So an amazing group. I'm really excited to get into the discussion. Before we start, I did want to just share a bit more about the topic and just kind of ground the conversation. So just make sure I can do this. So one thing that is really core to our conversation today is understanding that inclusivity in the retail experience goes well beyond the product on the shelves. It goes beyond the products to ensuring an inclusive experience in the store. You can see here, this is an example from 2019. Musical artist SZA was at a Sephora and she had a racial profiling experience. She quickly tweeted about that, and you can see how Sephora did quickly respond to that. But just the fact that someone who has graced the cover of Rolling Stone can experience something like that, imagine how many other people have had similar situations like that and haven't had kind of the social reach that she had to really create action out of that. So inclusion really does mean prioritizing a welcoming experience for every customer. In addition, it means how you present products on your shelves, on your website, on your e-commerce site. You can see here in 2020, Walmart was called out for locking up Black beauty products in display cabinets. They since announced that they stopped doing that, but it's definitely still an issue. And I actually wanted to just show you a quick TikTok video. Hopefully this will work. For some reason I've lost my arrow. There it is. And this went viral. Let's see.
Okay, so I'm at my local Walmart and I'm just looking at the makeup section and I noticed this. And I'm looking at the concealers and, they're all normal, but then once you get down to the darker shades, they have little security tags all over them, but they don't for the lighter colors. So Walmart, tell me that you're racist without actually saying that you're racist. So I'm at my local Walmart and I'm just looking at the makeup section and I noticed this. And I'm looking at the concealers and, they're all normal, but then once you get down to the darker shades, they have little security tags all over them, but they don't for the lighter colors. So Walmart, tell me that you're racist without actually saying that you're racist.
Menaka, you need to stop sharing the video to get back to the PowerPoint.
Yep, understood.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
Should be back in the PowerPoint, yeah? Okay, hopefully you're all able to see those videos. I'm always scared to show videos in these sessions. But the point of the video is that clearly inclusion is also about equal access to products. As you can see, that's still an issue in the retail environment. So ultimately, inclusivity in the retail environment is really about ensuring every customer feels like they matter. We did a study recently in our Ipsos syndicated online community, talking specifically to our members that are people of color. The study was really, the respondent base was really a mix of different races. It was about 40% Black Americans, 25% Hispanic Americans, and about 30% Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, including South Asians. So a diverse mix, but you can see in the data here that for more than 2/3 of people of color, they are really experiencing some level of exclusionary experiences in the retail environment. And you can see that kind of come to life in the quotes here from our members, that cold feeling of being ignored, how the people in the store are spending all their time and energy on the cute white women and I'm begging for help. And just feeling like every time I'm walking down the aisle, I'm being watched like I'm going to steal. So this definitely doesn't really represent an inclusive experience when you think about how these people are feeling in that retail environment. And what we're seeing and what we heard from our members as well is that, this really does ultimately drive customers away to spend their dollars where they feel like they're being better served. So that's happening both in the in-person experience. So you can see here, this is a quote from one of our members talking about an experience her daughter had when she went shopping for a prom dress. And you can see here that she was told by the sales lady when she wanted to try one of the dresses on, it was too expensive and she couldn't afford it. And the fact is this mother said she had given her daughter the credit card, she had the ability to buy it. And at the end of the day, she went to another store and bought a dress. This is also happening in the online environment for people. This is another quote from one of our members. She saw an advertisement for a lip balm. She clicked the link, went to the website, and when she wanted to really see kind of what it would look like on her skin, she only saw Caucasian models, and then she did see an African-American model, but her skin was more light than hers. And ultimately, as you can see here, she decided, I'm going to put my debit card back into my purse, and I'm not going to purchase anything from this person, from this site. So you can really see how these experiences impact the retail experience for people. The other piece that we wanted to ask our members is what does it mean to create a more diverse and inclusive retail experience? So clearly there's a lot of issues in the current process and people are experiencing that exclusionary, that feeling excluded in the retail environment. But there's definitely things that we can do to make it better. So there were a few key areas that we saw in our research. One was really about the staff. So hiring a more diverse staff, but also training staff at all levels. So that came up from a few members as well. You can see here in the verbatim, understanding the minority needs, and a lot of the the experiences that we heard from our members really do boil down to that experience that they're having with the actual staff in the store. It also included, having more inclusive and accessible products. So people talking about, actually seeing products that are related to their needs, finding people that can actually talk to them about products that relate to their needs. So just having more diversity on the shelves. It also, we also heard that featuring more diversity in packaging and promotions is important. So if you're going to put ads up, we want to see ourselves. It's refreshing to see ourselves represented. So we heard that as well. And then finally, my thing is blocking this, so let me just make sure I know what this is saying. Finally, the last piece here is about cultivating a welcoming retail environment. Probably the most straightforward, but this is the biggest piece of it, right? Because that was the core of all of the research that we heard from our members, is at the end of the day, if you feel ignored, if you feel like you're being watched, if you feel like you're being judged, or you have to beg for help, that's definitely not a place where people want to spend their dollars. So the good news is that we're seeing more proactive examples of retailers making some great strides in diversity and inclusion. So I've included a few examples here. This is definitely not every single example out there. The good news is that there are so many more retailers really prioritizing this. From the perspective of staff diversity and training, H&M, launched their Layers training, which is an internal workshop they're doing on a monthly basis, focused on both creating more diversity in their employee workforce, but also creating more diversity training for all of their staff. I mentioned the Sephora experience that SZA had earlier. In reaction to that, they actually closed their stores to host diversity and inclusivity workshops for their employees. And since then, they've made some really big announcements. They've joined the 15% pledge to put 15% Black-owned businesses on their shelves. And in addition, they launched the Sephora Accelerator that's really about helping to build and develop more BIPOC-owned brands. Similarly, Ulta has really made some great strides. They joined forces with Tracy Ellis Ross. They are putting a ton of money into creating more media that represents a more diverse audience. And they're also looking at how they create more diversity on their shelves as well. And Aerie is a wonderful example of a clothing company who has really made a big focus on having a large representation of different body sizes, different abilities, different races, and putting that out in all of their advertising and their marketing communications. And then finally, Target. The picture you see here is actually from a year and a half ago or so, where this is a child with special needs going into a Target and seeing someone that also had a walker on the POS in store, and just the experience that was. The mom actually did a post about it that went viral. But just seeing more diversity in the stores, seeing yourself represented in the actual point of sale materials makes such a big difference in terms of creating that welcoming environment. So I want to make sure that we can actually get into some conversation. So Ellen, should I just stop sharing this and so we can just see everyone's face?
Yeah, that's what everybody else has been doing. So I think that's a great way to go about it. Yeah.
Okay,
perfect.
Cool. All right, so let's jump into some questions. I'm going to start with Pamela. So our Ipsos research shows that 55% of Black Americans say they're more likely to purchase something from a brand who has taken a stand against racism. Can you talk more about your thoughts on why diversity and inclusion is so important and how a brand delivers on their purpose?
Well, Menaka, first of all, I'm not surprised to hear that number. I think consumers now more than ever truly understand that their economic power. Consumers are thinking about voting with their dollars. And so they're going to support the brands that they believe reflect, their own values. I think before you can talk about why diversity and inclusion is so important to how a brand delivers on their purpose, brands first have to take a look at their purpose. Is, a value around diversity and inclusion reflected in that purpose or their mission or, their stated values? And I think the brands that deliver on it best, have it as a core part of what they stand for and what they're trying to deliver.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really important point as people navigate the world of brand purpose, which is a term being bandied about quite a bit, but kind of figuring out how to make that real is something that I think diversity and inclusion has to play a part for sure. Adriana, I'm going to move over to you for a second. Our research reiterates that all shoppers are not treated equally. As I shared before, we saw like 2/3 of people of color feel that they've felt some level of exclusionary experience in the retail environment. What are some of the tangible ways you've seen this play out in the retail environment based on the research you've been doing?
Thanks, Monica. I think you touched upon many of them. So we definitely see different security standards, whether that means a tag or locked products or just a guard following you. Different levels of client service. I think you also touched upon that, like being ignored versus being acknowledged when you enter a retailer. Definitely the lack of representation in any kind of communication, the models, and it's not just people of color, it's also all ages. Like, why are all models young? Not everybody who's buying your products are young. You touched upon differently able bodies or disabilities, but it really is lack of representation. It's not one person, one type buying your products. Different body types is so important also. Obviously, product selection is a big one. Are we having the right products? And this is something that it's tricky because it's not. I think Tom from the chamber, U.S. Chamber of Commerce said we can't lump all companies together. We also can't lump all consumers together. So retailers will do efforts of like, well, I'm going to have now ethnic products or multicultural products. Here you go, all these new products for coily and curly hair, and of course, people with coily and curly hair are yay, but everybody who else you promised ethnic products, multicultural products, or Asian, or only 30% of Latin Americans, for example, that live here actually do have very coily, curly hair. So everybody else is like, wait, you said ethnic and you're still leaving me out. So you're making a huge promise and then not backing it up because we're like, okay, here you go, curls for everyone. And they're amazing, but not everybody can achieve a curl. Definitely payment. We sometimes forget a little bit about that. Payment options and equal access. We know there isn't equal access to credit. How do you democratize or help bring accessibility through payment options? And more inclusivity that way to make sure that your products are getting there. And then obviously there's even things on the product itself, like packaging. Is this package excluding a group of people, your package alone? And we have to remember that package goes home with me. So even if I decided to buy it and maybe it wasn't a very diverse or it wasn't an inclusive package and I still decided to buy it, it's coming home. And, children are seeing that. And I don't know if Pamela, you would like to share a little bit about package, because I know you have an amazing story about package and inclusivity there that you could share with us.
Oh, yeah, Adriana's referring to early on in my career, I worked at Clairol hair color company, and I was the brand manager for the Nice and Easy brand, which was at the time the largest brand, had the largest offering, 42 shades, which meant that there were 42 packages on the shelf, all with different women. And when I became the brand manager, there were no women of color. Every woman on every box was white, despite the fact that we knew that a large percentage of our users, of our consumers, were not. And so instead of creating a whole separate, line, which had been the strategy up until that point. I asked the question, well, why aren't we just reflecting African American consumers on some of the shades that we know are more popular with them? And so it took a lot of fortitude and a lot of convincing, but we got there. And those shades took off because consumers saw themselves reflected on a product that they were already buying.
Yeah, actually, that kind of segues into a point I wanted to ask Adriana about as well, just because I know you work both with retailers as well as with product manufacturers. How do you see the role of the product manufacturer? I mean, that's a perfect example that you just shared, Pamela, in the context of creating a more diverse and inclusive environment.
Yeah, I think it goes so hand in hand. Product manufacturers all the time are guiding retailers, helping them with where should I put my product in my shelves? What's the right pricing strategy? What's the right promotion? This is also a topic where manufacturers can take a stronger hand and guide retailers when it's needed. In diversity and inclusive, especially the bigger manufacturers that have very strong positions on this, can nudge retailers to go in the right direction, and the other way around too. The retailer has the power to say, you know what, all your models in your boxes look the same. Please change that if you want me to keep buying from you. So they definitely have so much influence on each other and so much possibilities to collaborate and leverage that existing collaboration to take a big step forward and ensure that diversity and representation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of this boils down to representation at the leadership level. If I think we were talking about this when we were prepping for the panel today, like if there were people that had these experiences at those levels making these decisions, there absolutely, you could see a shift from that. So Pamela, you actually have, a great experience to share just in terms of your work at Nike and how that, I know you mentioned you experienced racial profiling while at a Nike store. Could you maybe share a little bit about that experience and kind of how you see kind of that leadership piece playing a role in how to create a more inclusive environment?
Yeah, it was quite an interesting experience when I was the vice president of retail brand marketing for North America at Nike. I was in New York with a group of people for store visits, as I know many of the retailers in the audience are familiar with. And we were visiting stores, talking to our store managers, understanding what was happening on the ground. And at one of our stops, I asked if I could use the restroom. So I had to go kind of behind the door, if you will. And as I was coming out, one of the sales associates started to chase behind me because she wanted to check my purse. And the store manager caught her, just kind of waved her away. And played it off. But I knew what happened. I knew what was going on. And interestingly, that employee was herself African American, or appeared to be, which tells me that it's really about, how are we training our in-store associates? And how are we driving messages from, headquarters or the central team, especially when you have a business or a brand that has a really big retail footprint, right? That's a lot of layers that you have to go through in order to get your messages down to the employees who are interacting with consumers. And I think, it's very interesting that here you put an employee potentially in a difficult position. There have been other stories, where not at Nike, but a young woman that I was speaking to who worked at a different retailer, her mother actually came in the store and her white manager said, keep an eye on her, because she was Black. So I just think sometimes we lose the common sense and we forget about just the humanity, that needs to happen. That TikTok video that you played of the Walmart cosmetics, where all of the light shades had no security tags. And then as soon as you got to the darker shades, there were security tags. There is probably a report somewhere that says, hey, we've had a lot of inventory shrinkage on these particular shades. I get that. But you have to get out from behind the data. You have to remember that. And especially as we're getting more and more and more data, right? We can get lost in all of the numbers, and we can forget about the humanity of the implication of, our decisions. And so if you're seeing inventory shrinkage on shades of that particular product, then, why not make it an all or nothing? Why not security tags on all of those products? So that you're thinking about, okay, how is this going to look when a consumer walks up to a shelf? And you have to really work through some of those disconnects for sure.
Yeah, I know. When you see examples like that, you do wonder about some of the common sense thinking behind it. Did anyone really think about what that would look like? Actually, so just before we jump into some of the audience Q&As, I did want to just, I mentioned at the beginning of today's presentation that a lot of retailers, a lot of brands in general have made some pretty large announcements, commitments, and even made some moves in terms of really being more proactive in the context of prioritizing diversity and inclusion. From your perspective, and this is a question to both of you, what do you think is really critical in shifting from words to action? Because I know a lot of our research reiterates that, okay, is it just words? Are you just saying what you think you need to? Or are you actually going to do something about it? What are some of the things that you think are critical from that perspective? Pamela?
You can jump in first. Go
ahead, Adriana.
I think you touched on it already, but I think something that's critical is who is making these decisions? Do you have the right people sitting on the table? Do you have representation of all these voices sitting at the table? Just like we said, one person that can look at it okay, am I there? Oh, wait, there's nobody that looks like me there. Fix that. But if you only have people that are maybe traditionally overrepresented or properly represented, they won't notice what's missing because their eye is not going to catch those things. So I think it really is so important to have that diversity all the way across the organization. Obviously, people facing customer service, but also the people making the decisions in the first place.
Yeah, I agree with Adriana. It's so important to make sure that there is a diversity at the table. By the same token, I also think that diversity and inclusion is the responsibility of every leader, no matter what that leader looks like. And if that leader doesn't understand the experiences that people who don't look like them are having in their stores, then that leader needs to get out into the store and do their homework. It's incumbent upon them to, in order to be able to deliver a premium experience, right, a meaningful experience for every consumer. You also can't just look at, whether it's the Asian person at the table or the African American person at the table and think that they're going to have all of the answers. Yes, they're going to definitely add to the diversity of the conversation, and McKinsey has done tons of studies to show that the more diverse leadership is, the better the bottom line, right? Greater profitability. So we know that, but we also need to remember that it's a responsibility of every leader.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've seen retailers actually say that as well. I know Target announced that they're putting real KPIs against their leadership as it relates to D&I priorities. So really great points. Wendy, did you want to join us and share any questions from the audience?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you all. These not only important lessons, but really brought it to life with the stories. So really resonated. Yeah, we do have a few questions coming in, and I will remind the audience that if we don't get to your question, we will answer via email. So One question that's come in is, what are the experts' take on brands renaming some of their products due to Black Lives Matter, such as Aunt Jemima?
I'll take that one.
I figured you might.
Okay, first of all, the protests this summer may have been a catalyst for that conversation, but I don't want anyone to walk away and think, oh, well, they just renamed that product because of the protesters. I'm hoping they renamed that product because the name of that product was offensive, full stop. And, you know, the fact that it took them so long to make that change, I think is very unfortunate, although I'm very happy to see that that change has taken place. Aunt Jemima was not a positive symbol, you know, for any brand for many, many reasons that I, you know, won't go into. And again, you know, as we were just saying, that the responsibility for being inclusive falls on everyone, regardless. You know, I would hope that every brand is thinking about this because it's the right thing to do, not just because someone protested, you know, last summer.
That's great. That pretty much sums that up. Okay. What role do you think large retailers can play in supporting smaller businesses like women and POC owned?
I can take a quick shot at this. I think that, you know, this came up a lot because all these retailers are making these pledges to have more Black-owned businesses or minority-owned businesses or POC-owned businesses, whatever you want to call them, but more diverse-owned businesses on their shelves. And then there's this clear implication that comes with that, which is if all of a sudden this small business has all of this like a new distribution channel, are they really set up to actually be successful to deliver and fulfill against that increased demand or inventory need? Do they have the marketing support? Do they have like the distribution and the supply chain support? Like, so I think it goes beyond just making a commitment to putting the things on the shelf. It's more, how are you actually helping that small business across all of those areas? So I think the Sephora news around the Accelerator that they launched is a great example. And we're seeing that from other retailers as well, of how really helping from start to finish to kind of create more opportunities for BIPOC-owned brands.
I'd love to build on that as well with another example, which I feel like doesn't get talked about enough, which was the launch of Fenty Beauty. Mm-hmm. And Fenty Beauty, which was backed by LVMH, launched immediately into every Sephora door. And just supplying the initial base of Sephora doors made that a huge launch and hugely successful, not just in terms of the exposure that all of those stores gave them, but, you know, literally just an initial buy, right, to stock that many doors. And that didn't take an accelerator program. That didn't take any special focus, right? That just took some smart business thinking. It is smart business to offer and deliver products for your consumer base. And especially as we look across the U.S. Every day is becoming more and more diverse. We talked about this. I was saying to Menaka, the one quote from her consumer panel that she shared where the consumer was referencing minorities. Well, the minority is the majority in several states across the U.S. and will soon, you know, be so even more. So it's not about addressing minorities. It's about reflecting, you know, and addressing the needs of your consumer base, which is more diverse.
Yeah, I saw a stat that 55% of Gen Z is people of color. So yeah, officially the majority.
Yeah.
Great. We're at time. Any final thoughts before we close this session?
I just want to reiterate what Pamela said earlier, which is just not forgetting humanity. I think at the end of the day, in all the data, all the research, all of us were like, do we really need research to tell us this? The people that experience this know it's true. And just remembering that at the end of the day, it's all about how you create a meaningful experience for everyone if you expect them to be your customer. and keeping that human lens on.
Great, thank you. Well, Pamela, Adriana, Manica, this was fabulous.